Hello, my name is David Murray, and I'm the Associate Director for Prevention and the Director of the Office of Disease Prevention at the National Institutes of Health. I'm pleased to welcome you to the second of three 2025 ODP Early Stage Investigator Lectures. We created this lecture to highlight early career prevention scientists who have not yet served as a principal investigator for a substantial NIH-supported research project, but who have made outstanding research contributions to their respective fields and are poised to become future leaders in prevention research. Before we begin, I have some housekeeping items. You can submit questions during the webinar via the Q&A pod. You'll need to open the pod by hovering your cursor at the top of the Teams window and then clicking on the Q&A icon. We will open the floor to questions at the end of the lecture. The slides and video recording will be posted on our website in the coming weeks. We're excited to present our second 2025 awardee, Dr. Julia Chen Sankey. Dr. Chen Sankey is a social and behavioral health scientist and an assistant professor at the Rutgers School of Public Health. Her interdisciplinary research focuses on critical issues related to tobacco and cannabis marketing. In this presentation, Dr. Chen Sankey will examine the predominant marketing themes employed by major e-cigarette brands across various channels, including social media, email, and magazines. She will explore how attention to and appeal of those marketing features differ between young adults who are naive to tobacco products and those who have established cigarette smoking behaviors. Finally, she will discuss the broader implications of these findings, highlighting opportunities for developing impactful policies and public health interventions aimed at reducing e-cigarette related harms among young people. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chen Sankey.
Thanks so much, Dr. Murray, for that kind of introduction. So today I want to really unpack the influence of e-cigarette marketing features, really delve into my insights into appeal, engagement, and behavior of those ad features among young adults. So I want to acknowledge my funding from the FDA, Center for Tobacco Studies, Center for Tobacco Products, and the National Cancer Institute for my award, ROO K99 ROO Award, and the U54 Award. I want to express that the comments and opinions from this presentation are just from myself and do not necessarily represent the views of Rutgers University or NIH, and I have no conflict of interest to disclose. And first of all, I'm going to give you an overview of my presentation. I will briefly first introduce the background and significance of the issue, followed by introducing my past and ongoing research studies. And then I will introduce the key takeaways and implications of the study, and wrap up the presentation by future research directions. So first of all, introduction. Since entering the market, nicotine e-cigarette use among U.S. young adults aged between 19 to 30 has been climbing, as you can see from this figure. Unlike the declining trend we're observing among adolescents, the past year user prevalence of young adults using nicotine e-cigarettes has nearly doubled in the past 6 years, jumping from 14% in 2017 to 25% in 2023. Nicotine e-cigarette use among young adults can lead to multiple health consequences. As we know, nicotine is an addictive substance. Using nicotine e-cigarettes in young adulthood can really heighten the risk of developing nicotine dependence during a critical period of brain development. And regular e-cigarette use is associated with highly likelihood of using cigarette smoking or smoking cigarettes in the future and using other substances. This can further extend the public health burden. There is also growing evidence linking vaping aerosols to airway irritation and a diminished lung function. And this really signals an urgent need for targeted prevention geared towards young adults. But on the flip side, mounting evidence also showed that nicotine e-cigarettes may serve as a promising tool for quitting or reducing smoking and reducing the harmful chemical exposure among young adults or young adult smokers. So why are young adults using e-cigarettes and continue to use e-cigarettes? One major risk factor for e-cigarette use among young adulthood is exposure to e-cigarette marketing materials. And then data showed that more than 80% of US young adults are exposed to e-cigarette ads in the past 6 months. And you can see from those ad examples shown in the slides that there are many different kinds of ads from emails, websites, social medias, and then magazines. Those ads can be very appealing to young adults, including cartoon characters, pop culture references, high contrasting colors, images of fruits, desserts, and beverages, and also very appealing claims. Those ads, many studies have found that those ads, exposure to those ads can really boost positive perceptions and the use intentions among young adult population. However, at the early stage of e-cigarette marketing research, most studies treated ads as a whole. Very few dissected which specific features actually drive those effects. Investigating feature level influence can be very effective to understand how e-cigarette ads influence behavior to inform policymaking and develop prevention strategies. As you can see, the right side of this slide, there are many types of product features used in e-cigarette ads, ranging from flavor-related features like fruit flavor, fruit images, candy images, to purchasing information and the price promotion of the products. There are also regulation-related features such as warnings and minor sales restrictions. So examining e-cigarette marketing influence at the feature level is critical. Due to the First Amendment of the Constitution, a complete ban on e-cigarette advertising is unlikely, but individual ad features can be restricted by localities and at the federal level. These ad features can also be regulated in very different ways. For example, nicotine warnings are required by federal laws, whereas cartoon characters are prohibited in many states' tobacco marketing restrictions. And at the federal level, through pre-market tobacco product applications, the FDA has the authority to review e-cigarette companies' marketing plans. Therefore, the feature level evidence is critically needed to guide those marketing authorizations. And in addition, from a theoretical standpoint, based on the means and approach marketing theory, advertisers and brands often use tangible ad features to create expected benefits and personal values that motivate product use. And such understanding can also inform counter marketing strategies that may reduce the appeal of e-cigarette marketing. Because of the importance of this line of research, during my first year of postdoctoral fellowship at NIH's intramural program, I chose to apply for the K99RO Award in Tobacco Regulatory Science to generate timely evidence to empower regulators and public health professionals to really craft targeted rules and counter-marketing strategies that curb young adult uptake of nicotine e-cigarette products. So when we're looking at the public health consequences of nicotine e-cigarette use among young adults, as I briefly introduced, it is very important to examine the issues among two groups of the young adult population from very different tobacco use backgrounds. We're seeing this one group who do not use tobacco, which is about 70 to 80% of the US young adult population. Using e-cigarettes for this group can really lead to nicotine addiction and other negative health consequences. However, there is another group who is about 15 to 20% of the US population, young adult population, who smoke cigarettes or who have established cigarette smoking. For this group, switching completely from cigarettes to e-cigarettes might reduce their harmful exposure to chemicals. So with this in mind, my research on e-cigarette ad influence examines the perceptions, the behavior outcomes among both populations of young adults. So my research on this line is really grounded upon message impact framework. As you can see, this framework, e-cigarette ads can impact ad receptivity and precursors to behavior, as well as behavior change. For ad receptivity, which is often measured by attention and reaction, we are looking at visual attention to the ads, cognitive engagement to the ads, recall of ad components, as well as emotions and the relevance perceived by the consumers. And then when the consumers or individuals receive ad receptivity, that might further change their perceptions or precursors to the behavior, which is often measured by product appeal, product use expectancies, risk perceptions, as well as their intentions of using the product or switching to the products. And this kind of perceptions and intention further will lead to behavior change. So the behavior change is usually measured by information seeking behavior, product purchasing behavior, as well as product use and switching behavior. So the goal of the K99RO award I proposed was really trying to identify the high impact e-cigarette ad features that change participants or young adults' perceptions and behavior of e-cigarette use. And throughout the study, I often looking into whether tobacco use behavior of those young adults or serve as a modifying effect to see whether the ad actually influenced those two groups in a very different way. So to answer those research questions, I used a variety of methods. First, I use heat map experiments, which really review which part of the ad draws attention from the participants by asking them to clicking or tapping on the ads or the ad component that is particularly drawing their attention. So this study is supported by the Qualtrics heat map functions and provides self-reported visual attention data to ad features. Relevantly, I also use lab-based eye tracking study, which gives us high-resolution gaze data to confirm where eyes actually dwell and how long to objectively assess visual attention to those ads. So this gives us the objective measures of of visual attention to the ads. And I also use online randomized exposure experiment to really draw the causal effects kind of association to understand by showing participants only one or a few specific ad features versus a control, whether certain ad feature is making a difference in terms of changing participants' attitudes, risk perceptions, and using intentions. Additionally, I use one-on-one in-depth interview, really trying to get at or gain a deep understanding of how each ad feature influences perceptions and using intentions. So really trying to get at the psychological mechanisms or the why and how those ad features are influencing those key outcomes among young adults. And taken together, these complementary methods help me understand what draws attention, what truly influences behavior, and the psychological why behind young adults' attitudes, perceptions, and intentions of using the products. So now I want to delve into a few studies that I have already done on this line of research to address the research question. So for the first study, we used the heat map to look at different ad features influence among young adults who do not currently use tobacco products. So this study, we recruited our participants, young adult participants from Qualtrics online study panels, where participants viewed about 12 static e-cigarette ads from magazines and consumer emails in a random order. And then we asked participants to tap or click on the ads that they noticed or draw their attention. After viewing each ad, participants responded to questions about e-cigarette product appeal and use perceptions and interests. We used a generalized estimating equation GE model to analyze the within-person associations between noticing each e-cigarette ad features and perceived e-cigarette product appeal and use interests, controlling for confounders. So as you can see, this results from this study. We are focusing the use interest and use intention for this presentation because this is the closest perceptions that lead to behavior change. As you can see the results, the red results, highlighted results really signify the positive association, and the green ones are signifying the negative association. So as you can see, price promotions or discounts, if participants notice price promotion or discounts, they will have an increased interest of using the products. And they've also noticed mint fruit flavor related cues and images. They will also have an increased interest in using the products. However, when the participants are noticing nicotine warning, they will have a reduced interest in using the products. So we're seeing those very salient ad features standing out from all the other features that change participants' use interest or intentions of the products. Again, this study was among non-tobacco using young adults. And then the second heat map study we did was to look at very similar ad features, but among young adults who use both products. So they use both cigarettes and e-cigarettes. Again, we recruited young adults who smoke cigarettes and e-cigarettes from Qualtrics online study platform. Participants viewed 12 static e-cigarette ads from magazine and online websites in a random order in a heat map experiment. Participants tapped on or clicked on ad components that draw their attention and report their perceptions and use interests. Because this group also smokes cigarettes, so we also asked them about their intention to complete switch to the e-cigarette products shown in the ads. We used the GE model to look at the within-person association. So in terms of the results, I want to draw your attention to interest in product switching. Again, this is the goal we want the young adult dual users to have, is to encourage them to switch to e-cigarette products, complete switch to e-cigarettes products, and then stop smoking cigarettes. As you can see from the results, we're seeing the positive association really is from fruit flavor and the fruit images. So for young adults dual users, those who notice fruit flavor and fruit images were more likely to report complete switching intentions than those who do not notice those features. And in terms of negative associations, we're seeing that young adults who notice nicotine warnings, smoker targeted claims, and tobacco flavor related cues and images were the ones who reported negatively switching intention. So they're less likely to report complete switching intention. So we're seeing some of the consistent findings from non-tobacco using young adults here in terms of fruit, image, and flavors, and nicotine warnings. So follow the heat map study, we further conducted eye tracking studies to objectively measure visual attention to the ads and corresponding perceptions. So the first study we did was to look at eye tracking visual attention among young adults who do not use tobacco and also young adults who smoke cigarettes. Those young adults are recruited from social media in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York area. And participants came to our eye tracking lab at Rutgers University and viewed 30 cartridge and pod-based e-cigarette ads published in magazines and direct consumer emails. As an eye tracking device, we used Tobii Fusion to track their eye movements. After viewing those ads, participants completed a post-exposure survey that measured their perceptions. So for the eye tracking measures, we reported for each ad feature, their dwell time, participants' dwell time and entry time. The dwell time really measures the fixation duration or how long the participants look at each feature. And then the entry time really measures how fast participants look at each feature when they started to look at the entire ad. So really look at how quickly the ad features stand out to the participants. And then the perception measures we include product appeal and the positive use expectancies of the e-cigarette products shown in the ads. As you can see from those results, on the left, we have the dwell time results. Again, dwell time measures how long participants look at each ad feature. We're seeing the longest dwell time being the smoker targeted claim, followed by positive experience claim and price promotions. As you can see between the differences of the two groups who use tobacco and who smoke cigarettes, who do not use tobacco and who smoke cigarettes, we're seeing the only difference being the minor sales restrictions, where participants who do not use tobacco look at this ad feature much longer than those who smoke cigarettes. However, there's no differences between those two groups for any other ad features we examined. And for the entry time, again, it's measuring how quickly the ad features are drawing attention from participants. As you can see, the lowest entry time or fastest or quickest the participants look at certain ad feature was the multiple flavor description that draws attention very quickly. And then the second fastest was nicotine warning and people or attractive models used in the ads. And as you can see, the only difference between the two use groups we're seeing is purchasing information, where those who do not use tobacco has slower entry time than those who smoke cigarettes. So those who smoke cigarettes look at this ad features quicker. This is the purchasing information. From those results, you can also see that really very few ad features in terms of the attention data are different among the two tobacco use groups, which means that across those use groups, they're looking at those ad features in a very similar way. And in terms of association between those eye tracking data and the perception, we are seeing among both tobacco use groups longer dwell time or when participants are looking at multiple full flavor descriptors longer, they're also reporting higher e-cigarette appeal. This is controlling for other covariates that may serve as confounders. And in terms of the entry time, we're seeing the quicker participants look at full flavor descriptors, they're more likely to report positive e-cigarette use expectancies. So we're seeing a very similar trend here. And this is also among the both tobacco use groups. When we are doing the modifying effects analysis, we're not seeing any differences of those associations between the two tobacco use groups. So they're influencing a very similar way. And following the eye tracking study in the same study visit, we also assess participants' qualitative kind of reactions towards the e-cigarette ad features. So we used in-depth interviews and analyzed the data among young adults who do not use tobacco, the first 26 of them, as well as young adults who smoke cigarettes. Again, the first 26 of this group, user data to really delve into the why ad features influence their perceptions. So we ask questions related to the ads and the features. For example, we ask what came to your mind when you saw those e-cigarette ads? Was there one ad that stood out to you the most and why? Could you describe particular features or components of the ads that stood out to you? What did you think about this feature? How did you like the feature? Did this feature make you interested in using the e-cigarettes or switching to this e-cigarettes from cigarettes? And then we use reflexive semantic analysis method to look at the qualitative data. And there are some interesting themes came out of our in-depth interview. First of all, the most prevalent theme was fruit flavors are appealing and generate use interest. And this is among the both tobacco using groups. This particular participant who do not use tobacco said, well, I know that blueberry tastes like, I know what blueberry tastes like. I know I like blueberry. Maybe I'll like this blueberry as well, you know? This would be a comforting factor. The second prevalent theme we're seeing here is the smoker charted claims are unconvincing and reduce use interest among both groups. One participant said, these messages made me less interested because it's making such a bold claim with no proof. It's just saying it, so it doesn't convince me. The third thing we're seeing from this in-depth interview is price promotions. Price promotions are often viewed very appealing and generate user interest, especially among those who smoke cigarettes. This one particular participant said, I think one of them said, buy 10, get 10 free or something like that. It was pretty cool, pretty interesting. Seems like a good deal. Again, this is a very salient theme among those who smoke cigarettes. And we're also seeing lots of conversations about nicotine warnings. Participants overall view nicotine warnings as unappealing and reduce use interest, especially among those who do not use tobacco. So this particular participant said less interested for sure because of the fact that they even had to put something or put warning on an ad like this shows you how harmful the product it is. And lastly, we're seeing a consistent theme about positive experience testimonials influence among those who smoke cigarettes. Participants said, one particular participant who smoked cigarettes said, I would say they did make me interested, especially when they had testimonials. For example, from former smokers, some of the claims that they made, like the smell and the ability to not leave the house, did appeal to me. And this is, you can see an example of those testimonials shown in one of those ads we showed to the participants. So this is the in-depth interview results. As you can see, we saw some consistent themes between the two groups, but we're also seeing some of the ad features really are influential among those who use tobacco or who smoke cigarettes. So there's differences between the two groups we're seeing through our in-depth interviews here. And then by following the first eye tracking study, we further did our second eye tracking study that particularly looked at social media marketing of disposable e-cigarettes and associated perceptions. So for this study, we particularly looked at social media because in recent 5 or 7 years, social media platforms are widely used to promote disposable e-cigarettes from tobacco companies, retailers, and even influencers. So it is very important to assess, due to the high frequent use of social media among young adults, whether there is an influence among those ad features posted on social media. And we looked at a disposable e-cigarette brand or leading disposable brands on social media just because that was the most prevalent used products among young adults compared to cartridge or pod-based products in the past few years. And then we added additional social media specific features to our eye tracking stimuli, as you can see, including social media accounts that are generated by the disposable e-cigarette brands, as well as the comments from the audience of the viewers of the social media platform. And in terms of the specific methods, very similarly, we recruited young adults and who do not use tobacco, as well as young adults who smoke cigarettes from the nearby communities. And then the participants viewed 32 disposable e-cigarette marketing post images from Instagram as our eye tracker tracked their eye movements. And then we asked participants questions afterwards. Again, we use dwell time and entry time to look at their eye tracking measures. And then the positive perceptions we're measuring include product appeal and positive use expectancies, very similar to the first study. So the results are showing now in terms of the dwell time of how long the participants look at each ad feature. We're seeing the highest dwell time being the product descriptors that introduce the batteries, the amount of flavors, and kind of the chemicals included in the products and all that. Followed by social media accounts, which is generated by the brands, and then followed by fruit candy descriptors. So those are the features that really draw the attention the most. In terms of the tobacco use group differences, we're only seeing that those who do not use tobacco actually look at product descriptors for a longer period of time than those who smoke cigarettes. And for the entry time measures, which measures how quickly features draw attention, we're seeing the shortest amount of time is attractive models and most likely to be some of the influencers used by those brands that draws attention very quickly. And then the second one is nicotine warning, also draws attention quickly, and also personal items, which usually include computer parts, lipsticks, cosmetics, plants, that's showing in the background of those ads. And again, we're seeing no differences between tobacco use groups and very few differences overall among the two groups in terms of their eye tracking measures. And in terms of the results of the eye tracking time measures and the perceptions, we're seeing that the longer participants look at product feature images, the more likely that they're going to report positive perceptions toward those posts, social media posts. This is among the both use groups. As you can see, those product packages often include brand names, some of the product descriptors about how many puffs, nicotine concentration, as well as the product image, which is usually bright colors and fruit images, lots of candy fruit images, as well as the flavors of the product. So that's what the disposable e-cigarette packages often look like on social media. And we're also seeing among those who smoke cigarettes, the more time they spend looking at fruit candy flavor descriptors and price promotions, the more likely they're going to perceive products as in a positive way. So this is only among those who smoke cigarettes. We're seeing some group differences here. And just very recently, I conducted my last study for this K9 RO award, which really draws the causal influence of looking at certain high impact ad features and using tensions among young adults across tobacco use statuses. So the high impact features we selected based on the findings of our previous studies are fruit flavor features. As you probably have heard from previous studies, lots of the most influential ad features in terms of attracting attention or changing perceptions or influencing psychological mechanisms are all fruit flavor related ad features. So some of the ads really use different cues and images to describe the flavors that they're promoting. So we're seeing several themes here from the ad and those large-scale content analysis we're doing to inform those studies. We're seeing those ads use fruit flavor names such as strawberry and melon. They use product colors that corresponds to the flavor such as green for apple, red for strawberries. We're seeing fruit images such as watermelons and strawberry images, flavor sensation descriptors using the words as refreshing, sweet, tasty. We're also seeing a lot of flavor choice claims, including giving participants a selection of the flavors. And then we chose strawberry flavor for this experiment because the most common fruit flavors used in e-cigarette products and ads are strawberry flavors. And it is also very frequent and preferred flavor used by young adult population. So a little bit information about the study design. I used the Qualtrics online study panel and then recruited participants, young adult participants who do not use tobacco, who smoke cigarettes but do not use e-cigarettes. And also those who smoke cigarettes and use e-cigarettes. So 3 different young adult groups. And participants were randomly assigned to briefly view one fictional e-cigarette ad with the fictional brand Piley. And each ad contains high impact fruit flavor ad features under 6 different conditions. And after viewing that one ad, participants responded to post-exposure questions related to product perceptions and use intentions. As you can see from those different conditions, condition 1 is the control condition where we show classic tobacco products with muted color product color. And in the second condition, we added the strawberry flavor name to the flavor of the product without changing anything else. And then for the third condition, we further added the strawberry red color to the strawberry product to show corresponding color of this product. For the fourth condition, we used exactly what's in the condition 3, but also added strawberry images to show the sensory appeal of the product. And for the condition 5, we further added one statement to describe the flavor sensation of the strawberry flavors, bursting with sweetness and freshness. This is a claim we often see to market flavored e-cigarette products through those e-cigarette ads. And lastly, we're adding one more claim to give choices of flavors to participants. So we added discover our selection of unique flavors to the ad. So the participants were randomly assigned to view one of those ads. So in terms of the results, we're seeing those ad features describing strawberry flavor cues are really influential among our do-use group, the group who use both cigarettes and e-cigarettes. So you can see the results, conditions 2 to 6. So all of our experimental conditions were influential in changing use intentions for the do-use group. And we're also seeing switching intention being influenced by ads from conditions 4 to 6, where fruit images, sensory claims, and the flavor choice claims are added. So this is only among do-use group. And again, perceived ad appeal was also influential among the do-use group. We're seeing ads from conditions 3 to 6 have an impact on this group in terms of perceived ad appeal. In terms of the sensory appeal, we found all the experimental ads from conditions 2 to 6 have an influence among all groups in terms of their perceived sensory appeal of the products. So you can really see the strong influence of sensory appeal as a mechanism serving the influence of flavor-related cues to user intentions and switching intentions here. And this is among all the groups. And lastly, we saw no risk perception change from any of those experimental conditions among participants across groups. The risk perceptions specifically measured the perceived harm and addictiveness of using the products, and there's no influence by those ads at all compared to the control condition. So you can see from those results, really the biggest influence is among our do use group instead of in terms of using tension and switching tension instead of other groups. So after introducing all those studies I've done in this line of research, I want to kind of introduce the key takeaways and implications I think are important to highlight. First of all, as you probably already noticed, e-cigarette ad features influence product appeal and user interest in a very different way. We're seeing usually 12 to 15 different ad features appearing in those ads. And some of them really stood out to our participants and influence their perceptions and using intentions, but some of them really never have that influence. And we're seeing those ad feature influence share many similarities across tobacco use groups. However, the recent randomized exposure study is seeing that the food-related ad features are really having a strong influence among our do use group. We're also finding out that ad features directly highlighting product benefits and the functionalities were the most effective in shaping product-related perceptions among young adults who are from both tobacco using backgrounds, so non-users and users of e-cigarettes and cigarettes. Particularly, we're seeing food flavor profile and sensation increase product appeal and use and then switching interest. However, tobacco flavor profiles descriptions reduced intention interest. This is from the HEMAP study and then the in-depth interview. And then we're also seeing the smoker targeted claims reduced ads perceived relevance and appeal among those who do not use tobacco. So those claims are really perceived very negatively among those who do not use tobacco. And the positive experience claims, including convenience and the discreetness of using e-cigarettes, increased switching interest among those who smoke. So among those who smoke cigarettes are really seeking those convenience and discreetness claims to kind of encourage them to make the switch. And we're also seeing very interesting findings where many attention grabbing features, or those features that grab attention very quickly in e-cigarette ads, were not necessarily associated with product perceptions or user interests. Some examples are models, people used in those ads, personal items and social media accounts grab attention quickly, but do not have an influence on our young adults. And we're also seeing consistent findings that nicotine warnings consistently reduce use and switching, reduce use interest among non-tobacco using young adults, and even the switching interest among some of our smokers, young adult smokers. And we're also seeing this consistent finding among young adults who smoke cigarettes that price promotions constantly generated their use interest towards the products. And lastly, we find out that survey, in-depth interview, and other neurocognitive assessments needs to follow eye tracking. So the eye tracking really gives us a picture of where the participants are looking at and how long they're looking at certain features. However, more assessments and neurocognitive tools are needed to understand why the salient visual attention, as well as what the participants are actually viewing, how they're considering and understanding those ad features. So those are some of our key takeaways. And in terms of the policy implications, I want to point out the potential regulatory challenges that we are considering based on our study findings. The regulatory strategies really need to reconcile the similar power of many e-cigarette ad features across non-users, smokers, and do users. This might be especially important given that those policies might change those perceptions among all those groups. And we're seeing nicotine warnings and smoker charter claims really reduce the appeal for non-users, suggesting those elements should remain mandatory or prominent in e-cigarette communication and marketing. And then we're also finding out that for those who smoke cigarettes, food-related cues, price promotions, and convenience claims really increase their switching interest. So therefore, policies should allow carefully framed version of those claims while curbing their reach and exposure among young adults who do not use tobacco. And in terms of FDA authorization of products, we also learned that tobacco menthol flavor ads do not entice young adult population and may even lower their appeal towards the products. So this really defeats the intention of authorizing those products to encourage smokers to switch to e-cigarettes. And just to sum up, the findings really show that we really need a nuanced feature-level approach to restrict influential cues from e-cigarette ads for young adults who do not use tobacco, but at the same time preserving the ones that may promote complete switching intentions for those who smoke cigarettes. And this can really help maximize public health gains while also minimize unintended consequences of using e-cigarettes among non-users. But at the same time, it is also very important to investigate the impact of those ad features among children and adolescents and youth who are the most vulnerable by tobacco industry marketing. With that, I want to also briefly sort of talk through some of the future research directions I have in this line of research. First of all, I'm currently collecting data on looking at some of the very policy-driven features for e-cigarette products, including reduced exposure message and FDA authorization claims to look at whether they make a difference for those FDA-authorized e-cigarette products in changing young adults' perceptions and using intentions of the products. And I also want to bring this line of research, including the methodologies I've worked on to study cannabis marketing, as you can see from this ads of cannabis products. A lot of the ad features really mimic the e-cigarette or tobacco ads, but there's also distinct features that really highlight the unique functions and the benefits of using cannabis products that need to be studied among young adults in particular. I also want to look into more longitudinal studies. We're using multiple time point data collection to look at actual behavior change of those ad influence to see whether in terms of product information seeking, product purchasing behavior, and then initiation, use, and the switching and the quitting behavior influenced by those ad features. So those are some of the research directions I want to take in the future. And then finally, to wrap up my presentation today, I really want to express my sincere gratitude to several organizations and amazing individuals. First of all, I want to thank NIH Office of Disease Prevention and Dr. Murray for this incredible opportunity to present my research on this important platform. And I want to shout out to ODP's Tobacco Regulatory Science Program and Dr. Helen Meissner for your work in promoting tobacco science-based prevention and policymaking. I want to express gratitude for my funding agencies, FDA and NCI, who work to translate prevention science to tobacco regulations to protect public health. Also want to thank NMHD, National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparities, where I did my pre-doctoral and postdoctoral fellowships. And then especially thank you, Dr. Kelvin Choi, the scientific director of NMHD, to encourage me to pursue my ideas of this line of research. Many thanks to my mentors and colleagues at Rutgers University, especially to Drs. Olivia Wachowski, Andrea Valenti, Christy Jackson, and Chris Del Nivo for your encouragement, feedback, and support that kept the project going. I want to thank my research team at Rutgers, Katie and Cian, and many other amazing research assistants for your hard work and dedication to this important project. And then finally, shout out to my husband and my 3 amazing kids, Clifton, Phoebe, and our newest adventurer, Millie, for being my everyday inspiration and enjoying me on this amazing journey. And I thank also today's audience for your time and attention and welcome any feedback, comments, or questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chen Sankey, very much. Let's move into questions. Here's one from our audience. Given how nicotine warnings were shown to reduce interest in use, how consistent was the inclusion of these warnings in different advertising channels, especially social media?
Yeah, so we're seeing a strong influence of noticing nicotine warning in reducing appeal and the use of our product of the e-cigarette products among young adults. However, when we're doing the content analysis for Instagram posts, social media, trying to find our eye tracking stimuli, we're seeing very low presence of nicotine warning. We were even getting into a lot of challenges of finding enough Instagram posts that contain nicotine warnings because we want to make sure all those ad features are similarly presented in our posts, but we were having a lot of challenges of finding those ones with warnings, which is very unfortunate because we know the strong impact of those. So I think for the eye tracking study we did for the social media studies, we further emphasize really the inclusion and mandatory kind of enforcement of having nicotine warnings in our social media posts from those major brands, especially, is very important. So that's definitely something I think policy enforcement is incredibly important to really reduce the appeal of those ads among young adults.
A follow-up question. Were there cases where this nicotine warning was not included in the ad, not following FDA guidelines?
Yes, they are usually very small at the bottom of the social media posts with very small text. And they're usually using very muted colors, kind of hidden at the bottom of the posts. Very hard to find. Again, we had a lot of difficulties of finding the nicotine warnings in social media ads that we can really use for a stimuli, and then that also kind of made us think like how our participants are even well informed, or even young adults well informed of the harm of e-cigarette use by looking at those social media ads. But I think that's very particular to social media posts. The magazine ads and then the brand website and email ads we're seeing often contain standard government nicotine warnings. So those are really large, high contrast colors, the standard nicotine warnings, but definitely not for social media ads.
Um, can you discuss more about how the nicotine warning decreases appeal for those who smoke? For
Mhm.
example, do you have data on those participants' interest in quitting and whether that interest is driven by wishing to eliminate addiction versus decreasing harms?
Yes, so we are seeing that mainly from our HEMAP study. We're seeing noticing nicotine warnings reduce appeal among non-using tobacco adults, but also those who smoke cigarettes. Um, I think one of the reasons we found through the in-depth interview is really that some participants mentioned about the switching of e-cigarettes. Basically, there's still nicotine in both products. Why do I make the switch? So there's kind of comparing the harm of the products directly associated with nicotine exposure, but the lack of understanding of other exposure to other harmful chemicals from cigarette smoking. Without those information about other harmful chemicals, participants looking at the ads with nicotine warning, that's all they think about. That's the harm of those products. That's the harm e-cigarettes have, and why do I make the switch? So I think one of our conclusions from one of our recent studies is that maybe there needs more information in terms of other harmful chemicals in e-cigarette ads to kind of inform the participants. Those are the ones that's cancer causing. Those are the ones harmful. Those are the ones that we can really kill you in the long term. So those are the ones that's why we're encouraging to switch instead of the nicotine. So that's something that definitely very interesting. I think the in-depth interview data really give us a little bit more information of why that reduced smokers switching interest.
Uh, Based on this research, what would a successful tobacco counter marketing campaign look like tailored to young adults?
Yeah, that's the question I always ask myself is how do we use ad influence evidence from the marketing standpoint to really inform preventive actions, including counter marketing strategies or public health communications? Um, we are seeing that a lot of those through related cues, right? Through images, sensation claims, and then the claims of describing the food flavors are actually very important and very influential in terms of changing the perceptions for those young adults who do not use tobacco. So we're thinking really, how do we target those food-related features and the candy flavors maybe also to kind of describe its potential negative effects among young adults. So we're seeing a lot of the evidence showing that those fruit images are more likely to make young adults could continue to use e-cigarettes or use e-cigarettes more regularly or in a higher dosage. So maybe this kind of messaging regarding those flavors can be used to design those counter marketing campaigns. And then we are also seeing that looking at the ads with smoker targeted claims really is preferred very negatively by young adults who do not use tobacco. So they don't want to see any information that shows e-cigarettes are only for smokers because they feel they're disconnected from those products. So I think that point can be really used to inform counter marketing or even marketing restrictions or policies is really trying to add smoker targeted claims maybe to show like those products are only for smokers in those ads or in those campaign messages to convey to our young adults who do not use tobacco that those products are not for them. This is very problem finding that we have from our in-depth interview and a consistent finding we're seeing from our heat map experiment. So those are some of the key takeaways I think will be important to add to our public health campaign.
Do you plan to conduct intervention studies, that is, randomized trials, to test strategies to reduce onset and increase switching based on changes to ad features?
That's an interesting idea in terms of a trial to look at it. I think some of the strategies that we talked about in terms of counter marketing strategies can be really used to really look at how do we those ad feature influence can inform the communication of the messaging to reduce the appeal. So I think it will be from counter marketing strategy versus from a commercial ad strategy because a lot of the work we do is trying to directly inform policy making and also counter marketing strategies. So I think public health campaign will be an effective way to use those evidence to be designed as a clinical trial to reduce the appeal of those ads. That's a good idea. Thanks.
Did you ask participants if they smoked hookah? Some young adults do not think smoking hookah makes them a smoker.
We did not ask about hookah, although when we are defining those who do not use tobacco, we also consider hookah as a tobacco product in our eligibility screening. So all of our young adult participants who do not use tobacco also do not use hookah. But on the flip side, for our young adults who smoke cigarettes, for this particular population in our participant pool, they might also use hookah. So it's definitely interesting to see how some smokers will use multiple products, and then maybe some of those products will also influence their perception towards the e-cigarettes. Versus for those who do not use any tobacco, they're just very naive to any tobacco products. Any of those perceptions really do not go play with e-cigarette perception. So that's definitely a difference there. Yeah, that's an interesting question.
You noted early on that e-cigarettes may have a beneficial effect among young adult smokers by encouraging them to stop or reduce smoking cigarettes and use e-cigarettes instead, that is, switching. Do we know that e-cigarette use is better for health than combustible tobacco?
That's an interesting question. Current evidence is showing the e-cigarette use can substantially reduce the harmful chemical exposure compared to cigarette products. The A lot of the intention of authorizing e-cigarettes currently through the FDA, PMTA pathway is really trying to review those chemicals and then harmful effects of e-cigarette products, and then making sure they can protect the health of the adult smokers if they switch to those e-cigarettes. So a lot of those compared to the cigarette smoking chemicals. So that's why when we're authorizing those FDA authorized e-cigarettes, we're really looking at in terms of switching, right? The smokers have to completely switch from cigarettes to e-cigarettes to reduce the harmful chemicals and exposure to those chemicals. So there's definitely evidence showing that, and then that's the policy making rationale as well.
Thank you. Here's a question about some of the eye tracking experiments. Do specific neurocognitive responses like attention bias or cognitive processes correlate with increased appeal or intention to use e-cigarettes? And if so, how do these types of findings, or how can these types of findings help inform FDA regulatory strategies?
Yeah, so we're looking at certain app features for a longer period of time really is associated with a lot of the perceptions. After controlling for many confounders we think might influence both attention and the perceptions. So that means those particular app features really stand out in the ads just because many e-cigarette ads have so many app features that we don't really know which app feature works. So the eye tracking component can really help us to understand where they're looking at, what they're thinking, maybe also what are the app features that are really drawing attention quicker and changing their entire perception towards that. And those kind of connection between eye tracking and perception data can really help policymaking in terms of linking the particular app feature to the perception. So in terms of policymaking, we often look at restricting app features in state and the federal level. So the eye tracking piece and the perception piece really give us more insights in terms of which app feature might be the candidate for policymaking and potentially for marketing restrictions. Without this data, we really don't know if an ad work, but how it works, which ad feature makes the ad work. So the attention data is really there to help us to understand that piece.
Now, this question, to what extent do nicotine-free or 0% nicotine vaping products serve as a gateway to nicotine-containing alternatives through brand loyalty and curiosity? That question presupposes that nicotine-free or 0% nicotine vaping products are on the market. So please address that question. Are they? Are they sold? And then the question about whether those kinds of products might lead to nicotine-containing vaping through brand loyalty or curiosity.
Yeah, I think some of the study design that we usually use, eye tracking, in-depth interviews, and heat map can really also address that question in terms of if participants look at those nicotine-free labels or claims or tobacco-free claims, nicotine zero claims to see if that really change their perceptions or experimentally manipulate some of those claim features to see if that kind of drive their curiosity of the products. So I think that could be done in terms of those study design, and it can also have policy implications of drawing those attention data with perception and intention of use.
I note that we have reached the top of the hour, so let me thank Dr. Chen Sankey for a terrific presentation, and thank our audience for many great questions. We haven't gotten to them all by any means, but we've run out of time. As I mentioned earlier, we will post the slides and a recording of today's presentation on our website in the next few weeks. I want to thank everyone for joining today's lecture.